Welcome back to the Better Learning Podcast. We are continuing our conversations at EDspaces in Columbus, Ohio. We hope you're enjoying this series, and let's dive back in. We are continuing our conversation here today at EDspaces in Columbus. We are talking radically student-centered, and we've been getting a lot of diverse perspectives here. And we have our next guest on for Thursday. I'm going to let her introduce herself, a little bit about her, who she's with, and maybe just a fun fact about you.
Thanks very much, Matt. My name's Kirsty Montgomery. I'm the head of school at the Avery Coonley School, which is in Downers Grove, Illinois, just outside Chicago. It's a pre-K3 to 8th grade school for gifted students. We have 330 students there.
Awesome. And how long have you guys been around, the school itself?
The school has been around since really 1906, though the current building was built in 1931. It's a historic building. I think we're maybe going to mention a little bit about that as we move forward.
Yep. Awesome. So I kind of mentioned this before. We are talking radically student-centered. We want to kind of get everybody's perspective, how they would define that. So I want to ask you, what does radically student-centered mean to you?
It's interesting when you first mentioned that phrase. I think radical, meaning maybe thinking about the political climate that we're in right now and kind of like, extremes, if you like, and polarization. But then if you think of, radically as an adjective, it's really more related to how you can make change. That's at least how I see things, and how you can kind of, center the student experience and thinking about, what changes you can make. Very different changes in order to improve the outcomes for your students.
I love that. And you guys are doing some really amazing work at your school, and I know we're going to dive into that. But I want to talk about how the radically student-centered mindset is impacting your work. So we had a fun wheel. Have you heard of the conference Learningscapes? I'm just kind of curious. No? Okay. So we were there in Phoenix last week. We had this fun wheel where you spun, you got a random question. Our wheel got caught in Phoenix and it didn't make it to Columbus, unfortunately. So maybe fortunately, though. I think some people like picking their question. So we had our wheel of questions, and we're letting guests kind of pick what they want to talk about. And you are the first one at this conference to pick this question. So I'm really excited to hear your answer. The question we're talking about is, can you share a time when a design decision directly influenced how students learn, interact, or feel within a space?
The decision that comes to mind is the choice we made 2 or 3 years ago to bring all of the student support services together in one place in the building. The Avery Coonley School campus, it has a kind of historic wing that was built in 1931, and then we've had a couple of additions since then. And basically, the old building houses mainly the lower school. The newer addition houses the middle school, and then right in the middle is kind of where the reception area is, and down in the basement, or the renamed garden level, which I prefer, it sounds much nicer, is the school nurse. And there was some undeveloped space next to the school nurse. And when I arrived, I feel for personal reasons and for, experiences in my previous schools, I felt as though we had to bring all those services together that are so important to make students feel safe. And so we designed the space such that we would have, the school nurse, the social worker, the inclusion and belonging coordinator, gifted ed coordinator, learning specialists such as math and literacy, and all of those folks in one spot, where it was normalized that students would walk through that space and feel comfortable, right? So there's no kind of stigma attached to walking through the student support services. And oftentimes, students kind of, they visit the school nurse because they're regular frequent flyers. And in fact, they shouldn't be with the school nurse. They should be with a social worker. And so, again, having all of that together where those professionals can speak to one another was perfect. And so the decision directly influenced how kind of students learned and I would argue and felt within that space, because previously they would have to go to the kind of the dark recesses of the basement to kind of find support for various things. And it was always very obvious when students, well, I've got an appointment with the social worker, and then they'd have to leave class, and everyone would kind of know where they're going and what they're doing. And now it's just like everyone just kind of there's this constant flow of traffic in that space, and it's comfortable. It's acceptable for students to be in that particular purpose-built, purpose-designed space. And honestly, I've sat through some of the presentations in the last 2 days here at the conference, and there was an incredible presentation yesterday from an occupational therapist who talked about the importance of again making students feel safe and comfortable, because if you don't, then the learning can't begin. And so that to me is why that design was so impactful, and how it's made an incredible difference. The final thing I'd add is, there's sometimes this, in my opinion, this misunderstanding that, well, only certain kids need to access those spaces and those specialists, and if you don't need them, then why should we have to pay for them, or why should we? That should be a special thing for certain students. And honestly, talk about radical. I mean, I think that argument is just rubbish. It's rubbish because you don't know on any given day if a student's going to come into school and they witnessed a car accident on the way in and they need a bit of extra support. You also don't know, as a child develops through the grades, if their learning experiences and neurodiversities will change. You can't predict that when they come into kindergarten. And so, everybody benefits, everybody in the school, including the faculty who also are supported by these specialists. Everybody in the community benefits. And that's why that space is so important.
Man, I love that. I love that. So I want to kind of switch gears, because you had an amazing session yesterday with Leggett Architects. I want you to kind of talk a little bit about that process that we went through in that session, and how you kind of got a lot of community buy-in, student buy-in to the work that you guys are doing. Give us a little insight there, and then kind of where you're at right now in that entire process.
Given the age of the school, and the fact that so often it's described as magical, almost like Harry Potter-like, the campus and the surroundings, it was a challenge to kind of come up with a future plan for not just the physical buildings, but also the outdoors, which is so precious to the school community. And there are sensitivities about the space, including the fact that it backs onto a forest preserve. So we're sort of bounded by those areas, and then to a neighborhood. And so whenever you make changes, not just to the internal walls and structures, but also to the outside, it does impact others in the community, right? So when it was the first campus master plan we'd ever done in the history of the school. We wanted to be very thoughtful and intentional about how we did it. We also wanted to tie it to a strategic plan that we were working on, so they were running concurrently. And when you do strategic planning, you're trying to come up with the strategic priorities of the school that are not just the Board of Trustees' priorities or the head of school's priorities, but everybody's priorities. And the same was true of the campus master plan. And so the way that we did this, and we worked with Leggett on it, we had these workshop sessions. We timed them so that they were on institute days for the faculty, so that everybody could attend. And we kind of made it, everyone was voluntold to be there. We sent out invites through the homeowners association to get any neighbours that wanted to come. We said, we welcome your input. I think there's an opportunity for dialogue there, and to make sure that they understand that we want to be good neighbours, right? And so everybody came together. We had 2 workshops, one in the spring, one in the fall, and we literally kind of, brainstormed, prioritised how we envisioned the campus. And it's going to be different for everybody, right? And then we, as you guys did yesterday, we literally moved around physical blocks. We played architects and mapped out with the understanding that there are limitations on the campus, such as wetlands and historic preservations on buildings, to try and really envision a future for the school. It was an energizing experience for everybody. That I think the neighbors came away feeling that they had a voice. There was, a lot of it was kind of pie in the sky stuff, but actually from the kind of pie in the sky stuff comes some really cool ideas.
Yeah.
And one of the most, I think, remarkable, I don't know if this came out yesterday in the talk, was one of the most remarkable thing was that there was this absolute consensus across every constituent in that meeting, and there were 100 people probably in each workshop, was that the outdoor spaces was everybody's favorite space.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't think it did, but okay. Yeah, yeah. That's really incredible. And I love the idea of just letting everybody have a voice. Like you said, too, I think sometimes you open that up, and I love that you guys were saying no budget. Don't even think about that. Don't have that mindset. Don't close yourself off before you even start, and just, throw your ideas out there. And I think that was just so awesome that you guys included that in the process to get feedback. The last question I had for you is, as you're going through this process, how are you thinking, because you mentioned this school has been there a long time. How are you thinking out now the next 50, 60, 70 years out as you're going through this process to make sure that this campus that you're building is sustainable?
Yeah, one of the things that's important to us, I think, especially as we are surrounded by so much green space, is the sustainability, right? We worked very hard. I say the students worked very hard to get our Green Ribbon Award this year. And that meant, a lot of work to kind of, again, think about the future of the campus and what any additions that we're making, and making sure that they are environmentally friendly and sustainable. I do think, being as someone who's from, a country where historic buildings are, everywhere you go, and this idea that you really don't tear things down, you kind of try and preserve them. I do think there's a wonderful story to tell about the school and its history that you can kind of hang on to, while also, recognizing that education moves fast and technology moves fast, and you can't just sit back on your kind of 1950s education. You're not doing the students a service if you do that. So I see the next, now that we have the campus master plan, it's not about me or anyone who's in the school right now. It's about 2 or 3 generations down, when we have this footprint and we've identified very clearly areas that we can expand. And really having that forethought and future plan mapped out, it secures our future. It secures the future education for gifted learners, make sure that we truly live to our mission for years and years to come.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, if you weren't able to check it out, I highly encourage you to look at what the school is doing. We really appreciate you having on. Safe travels back to Chicago. And we hope to have you back on here soon. So thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us for this special EDspaces edition of the Better Learning Podcast. We hope today's conversation sparked new ideas and reminded you just how powerful student-centered learning environments can be. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow the podcast and share it with someone who's passionate about improving education. And as always, keep pushing forward, keep rethinking what's possible, and keep making learning better, one space at a time. We'll see you in the next episode.